thank you so much for joining us today. So you can go ahead and start on the first slide. So to talk about my art making process, I'm actually going to start with a simple breathing exercise that we're all going to do together. It's connected to my meditation and mindfulness practice, which is an important part of my creative life. I know for some it might feel sort of weird if this isn't something you do all the time, but it's just breathing. I bet you're breathing right now, right? So we're just going to do more of that. Okay, so just get comfortable in your seat and go ahead and close your eyes. I'm going to count us through 3 full breaths. We're going to breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, and exhale for 6. Ready? Okay, inhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, and exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Last one, inhale, hold, and exhale. Okay, great, and go ahead and open your eyes. Thank you so much for doing that with me, because now we can get to the serious business of talking about the 1997 action movie with John Travolta, Nicolas Cage, Face Off. For those of you who haven't seen it, I have a very quick synopsis for you. So Nick Cage playing Castor Troy, who's a terrorist, and John Travolta playing Sean Archer, an FBI agent, surgically trade faces. With Travolta as Cage and Cage as Travolta, the movie progresses with shootouts and chases, many consequential mistaken identity situations, more than one cliched use of mirrors, and more, but I won't ruin it for those who haven't seen it, so I'll stop there. And actually, before I get to what, if anything, this movie has to do with my art, I'd like to take a step back and talk about my process looking at this lithograph by the artist Vija Selmans. Selmans has influenced my work, and I wanted to share this piece of hers in particular because I think of my practice as wading in an ocean of ideas. What I'm looking at, reading, distracted by, frustrated with, what I'm talking about with my friends, all of these things make up the creative waters in which I swim. They seep into what I do and make in the studio. This ocean of ideas produces a lot of different types of art. I make sculptures, and I make photographs, and I do performance. And what I'm primarily working on while I'm here at Jentel are my graphite drawings, which I brought a couple in the back as well that I've made since I've been here. Regardless of the medium, I am broadly interested in perception and misperception. That our minds and the environment can shape, distort, and distract our observations. Some of my interest in perception is connected to my mindfulness practice, and I should just mention, in case you're not familiar with it, generally speaking, mindfulness is a cognitive practice of paying attention to your external and internal world with open, non-judgmental curiosity and kindness. Mindfulness is also connected to a strange thing that happened to me a number of years ago, so I have a quick story. I kept the notes that my best friend and I passed throughout high school. This is pre-texting era. And about 15 years ago or so, I found them, and when I read them, I was super embarrassed and ashamed, lots of cringe, with the boring talk about parties and drugs and boys. The person reflected in the note seemed annoying and vapid, and it was me, but it was not me. And then maybe 5 years later, I came across the notes again and I reread them. And this time, I wasn't ashamed or dismissive. I felt like I was looking at a person who was just that, right, young. I approached the notes with open, non-judgmental curiosity. And because my experience of reading the notes was so dramatically different that second time, I was totally convinced that the very paper, the very words had literally physically changed. Okay. I realized that the actual physical properties of a solid object could transform depending upon your perspective and state of mind. So those of you that are familiar with things like quantum mechanics and Schrödinger cat will be like, well, yeah, obviously we know that happens already. But really it wasn't that the notes had changed in this case, right? It was me. I had changed. Which brings me to rocks. I have found that rocks are effective objects when thinking about paying attention, imperceptible change, assumptions, and the limits of looking. Because of the confines of our relatively short little lives, we don't witness how the rocks around us, thinking of like the big horns and the Rockies, are ever changing. They've changed and morphed over millions and in many cases billions of years. And like this piece of petrified wood, which was found on my grandfather's farm in North Dakota. And while hiking last week in the 1,000 acres, we found lots of pieces of petrified wood there as well. Now, I still don't fully understand this yet, but while standing on the top of the hill at Jentel with Matt and Amber and Michael, we were waiting for the full moon to rise. And reading on my phone, I read that what likely happened was that millions of years ago, when this area had volcanoes, ash covered the trees in sediment. And slowly the cellular makeup of the trees was replaced with minerals. So in this case, over time, the actual physical properties of this object did transform. Because I find rocks so endlessly fascinating, I especially love drawing them. The poet and writer Mary Oliver said that attention is the beginning of devotion. You care for what you give your attention to. So drawing is my way of getting to know something and making a connection that I otherwise couldn't. More recently, I've especially been thinking about one particular rock that changes in ways that we can't easily see and plays tricks on our perception, and that's the moon. If you look closely, Michael's in this picture. You find the orange. So the moon is slowly moving away from Earth. And even though the size of the moon doesn't change, of course, it can look larger when it's near the horizon. The moon is also slowing down the Earth's rotation, making the days longer. In order to better understand this mysterious moon and to give it my adoration, I've been drawing it, or at least parts of it, and I used this NASA site called Astromaterials 3D, created by the artist Erica Blumenfield, to get as close as possible to pieces of the moon that were collected on various Apollo missions. With this resource, I've been making drawings like this, and like this. And you all probably already know this, but the moon's synchronous rotation means that we only see one side of the moon, right? The near side of the moon, and the other side is called the far side. And so you could almost think about these two sides of the moon being like two faces, which brings me back to the movie Face Off, which also floats in the ocean in which I'm swimming in my creative life. My fascination with this movie is not ironic, it is sincere. This outrageous movie, I think, is best enjoyed with non-judgmental curiosity and a suspension of disbelief. And if you're open to it, the ridiculous plot is also a very provocative thought experiment with mindfulness qualities. Echoing through this action classic are ideas like contending with yourself, the slipperiness of identity, and the transitory nature of the body. This absurd movie reminds me that when I pay attention to the vast, ever-changing universe and the flexible and infinite nature of the mind, I shouldn't take myself or fun action movies too seriously. Thanks so much. Any questions? Yeah.
I like the way you have them suspended. With shadow instead of on a flat surface.
That came a little bit from, there's an artist named Ito Styrel, and she wrote a really great essay that I'm not going to remember the name of, but I can think of it later for you. That was about shifting perspective in landscape and moving from, a horizon this way to thinking of Google Maps and things looking from above, which I'd love to talk to Diana about. and just how that changes our perspective of the world. And so I was interested in that. And then I like the ambiguity of the rocks floating in a space. You can't tell if they're falling or floating or levitating or whatever. And in the sculptural works that I make, it's a way of being able to communicate with the audience that they're made out of paper mache, that they're not real rocks. They look very convincingly like rocks. But when you get closer, you find out that there's something else. So a play with your perception there. Any questions?
I would love to hear the story about moon juice.
The moon is so amazing and magical, and so many people, it goes back very far in human history of loving the moon and being fascinated by the moon and thinking about how the moon impacts our spiritual lives and our physical lives, things maybe we can't see. And a friend of mine had this practice of when there's going to be a full moon, taking a mason jar out, filling it with water, writing on a piece of paper an intention for yourself or somebody else. It could be healing something, or may something go really well for this person, or may joy come into my life, may I be more courageous. And then you put that intention underneath the jar of water and you set that out, and the moon charges it overnight. So we all did that. I got all of these artists to do that last week when there was a full moon. So it's been very fun. Jentel is a great location to charge some moon juice. So.